London, Christmas Eve, 2019. The capital is winding down. Families are home, lights in the windows, the sound of carols drifting through the cold air. On a quiet Battersea street, 36-year-old Flamur Beqiri walks back from an evening out with his wife and young son. As they reach their front door, the night explodes. 10 shots are fired in seconds. 8 find their mark. Beqiri falls on the doorstep of his £1.7 million townhouse. His wife screams for help. Their 2-year-old stands frozen beside her. Inside, a 3-month-old baby lies sleeping upstairs. Christmas Eve has become a scene of horror. Police and paramedics arrive within minutes, but there is nothing they can do. From the first glance, detectives know this is not random. The attack is precise, fast, and professional. Shell casings scatter across the path, each from a 9mm handgun fired at close range. The killer is gone before the sirens are heard. Within hours, the victim's name is confirmed. Flamur Beqiri, Swedish-Albanian businessman, known in London's expatriate circles, and brother to reality TV figure Mise Beqiri. As officers begin to piece together who he really was, a different picture starts to form, one that stretches far beyond Battersea. Flamur Beqiri had moved from Malmö, Sweden, to London several years earlier. To neighbours he appeared polite, reserved, successful. He told friends he worked in the music industry, managing artists and producing tracks. But Swedish police already knew his name from another world, one of organised drug supply and long-running feuds between criminal groups. Back in Malmö, several shootings had erupted between rival networks. One of those networks had links to Beqiri. According to later evidence presented in court, that feud crossed borders and followed him to the United Kingdom. Detectives from the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Command take the lead. CCTV is gathered from every corner of Battersea. Hours of footage show a lone cyclist in a high-visibility jacket and workman's trousers, pushing a litter picker and black bin bag. The kind of sight that normally passes without notice. But this was no council worker. Underneath the disguise was Anis Hemisi, a 24-year-old Swedish-Tunisian kickboxer turned contract killer. For days he had been surveilling Beqiri's home, noting his routines, his vehicles, and the exact moment he returned each night. The bike was fitted with a basket. Inside it, police would later discover he carried his weapon. On the evening of the 24th of December, Hemisi waited in the shadows of the street. When Beqiri and his family appeared, he moved quickly, 10 rounds in rapid succession, 8 striking from behind. Then he cycled calmly away, abandoned the bike nearby, took a taxi to a rented apartment at Oyster Wharf, and by early morning boarded a flight to Copenhagen. By Christmas Day, he was out of the country. The rented apartment becomes the breakthrough. Inside, detectives find the same high-vis jacket seen on CCTV, a litter picker, and packaging from the purchased bicycle. They find fingerprints, traces of Hemisi's DNA, and travel documents linking him to the address. The flat had been booked weeks earlier by another Swedish national, Estevan Pino Munizaga, later accused of assisting in the plot. Digital data and airline records confirm Hemisi's arrival in London 4 days before the murder and his departure hours after. It is, as investigators describe, a professional assassination carried out with chilling efficiency. The motive takes longer to unravel. Through cooperation with Swedish authorities, British detectives learn that Beqiri had been associated with individuals involved in large-scale cocaine trafficking. In Sweden, members of the Malmö gang world had been targeted in a series of tit-for-tat shootings. Prosecutors later allege that Hemisi's mission in London was part of that same cycle of revenge. He was, in their words, a hired gun sent across Europe to silence a rival. 18 months of investigation follow. Interpol notices are issued. Data is shared between the UK, Sweden, and Denmark. By 2021, Hemisi is arrested in Copenhagen and extradited to London. He pleads not guilty. 3 other Swedish men are charged as accomplices. 2 local contacts in the UK are accused of cleaning up evidence after the shooting. The case goes before Southwark Crown Court in early 2022. It is one of the most complex international murder trials heard in Britain in recent years. Prosecutor Louise Attrell, opening for the Crown, tells the jury, "This was a shocking, cold-blooded and brutal killing of a man in front of his young family on Christmas Eve. The intention was clear, to kill." She lays out the timeline, the purchase of the bicycle, the disguise, the reconnaissance, the flight plans. Jurors watch hour after hour of CCTV as Hemisi's movements are traced from Heathrow to Battersea and back again. They see him walking the streets days before the murder, pretending to pick litter while secretly observing the victim's home. They hear how a getaway taxi was booked under a false name and paid in cash, and they see forensic photographs of the flat at Oyster Wharf, where detectives found the items that tied him unmistakably to the scene. The defense paints a different picture. Hemisi, they say, was a professional athlete, a kickboxer who came to London to meet a woman and watch Netflix. He admits renting the flat but denies any role in the killing. He claims coincidence, mistaken identity, and insists he has been framed by the true masterminds behind the feud. His barrister urges the jury to see him as a pawn caught in other men's games. But the evidence is overwhelming. Ballistics match the weapon to cartridges recovered outside Beqiri's home. DNA on clothing and the bike frame matches Hemesi. Travel data shows he left the country within hours of the shooting. When confronted with this, investigators say he had no plausible explanation. Over 10 weeks of testimony, the court hears from forensic specialists, detectives, digital analysts, and witnesses from both London and Sweden. They describe encrypted messaging, cash transfers, and months of planning. They describe how the gunman trained his body and mind like an athlete preparing for a contest, except his contest was a contract killing. On the 11th of February 2022, the jury delivers its verdict. Anis Hemesi is found guilty of murder and possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life. He shows no visible reaction as the foreperson reads the decision. His co-defendant, Esteban Pino Munizaga, is convicted of manslaughter, having provided material support. 2 others are acquitted of the main charges. 2 British men, Clifford Rollox and Claude Isaac Castor, later plead guilty to perverting the course of justice for helping to dispose of evidence. At sentencing, the trial judge addresses Hemesi directly. He describes the crime as international organized crime at its most brutal, an audacious execution designed to instill fear. He speaks of the family forced to watch a husband and father die on their own doorstep. He acknowledges that while Beqiri himself may have had criminal associations, nothing could justify the calculated murder witnessed by his children. Hemesi is sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. Pino Munizaga receives 15 years for manslaughter. In the months that follow, investigators in Sweden continue to probe the networks suspected of ordering the hit. The motive remains complex, part revenge, part business, part demonstration of power within Europe's cocaine supply chain. What is clear is that this was not an isolated act of violence, but one node in a web stretching across cities and borders. For Beqiri's family, the verdict offers limited closure. His widow describes a life shattered in seconds. His sister, the television personality, withdraws from public life for months. The children, too young to understand, are left with memories of flashing lights and police tape where a Christmas tree once stood. The case leaves behind questions that reach beyond one street in Battersea. How do criminal networks operate across Europe with such reach and precision? How can a gunman travel, rent property, purchase equipment, and carry out a killing in one of the world's most surveilled cities? And how does justice balance the fact that victims may themselves have lived double lives, both perpetrator and prey? For the Metropolitan Police, the case becomes a model of cross-border cooperation. Thousands of hours of CCTV analysis, digital tracing, forensic linkage, and collaboration with Europol and Swedish authorities. For the courts, it demonstrates that even the most calculated hitmen can be tracked, tried, and convicted through patience and evidence. In the end, the murder of Flamur Beqiri stands as a portrait of the modern underworld, organized, global, and ruthlessly efficient, yet still vulnerable to the persistence of investigators. A feud born in the back streets of Malmö ends in a quiet London cul-de-sac on Christmas Eve. A father is gunned down before his family, and a young assassin, once a promising athlete, spends the rest of his life behind bars. Justice, in this case, does not restore what was lost, but it reminds us of something else. That beneath every headline about gangland violence are real families, real grief, and the simple truth that violence, no matter how calculated, always collapses in the end.